Are you going to Florida AFS? We're recording.
We're recording. I don't think I've ever been to Florida AFS. When is it? Where is it?
This next week, St. Augustine. You always buy all the raffle tickets, but then I haven't never seen you.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, but now I don't have my connection anymore.
I'll be there selling tickets. I'm student body.
Speaking of AFS, Matt, did you know that we know the lead author of this paper?
No, I didn't know that.
And you may have actually met him at
I think I did
AFS.
No, I did meet him. Yeah, I did meet
him. I didn't realize it until Cody just said it. I was like, oh crap, it's that Luke. So yeah, he's a super cool guy. He won a fishing rod in the Fact Network raffle that I put a bunch of money into, hoping to win that fishing rod, and then he won it. And I was a little jealous. And now I'm putting things together because I remember him being like, oh, this is awesome because I'm heading up north to go striper fishing. And that was in 2023. So I wonder if that fishing rod was used for this paper.
I don't think the data's.
No, I think all the sampling was done it was all done in 2010 and 2011.
Oh,
okay, well,
that part of the paper I read.
Yeah, it's more than I read now. All right, let's get into this thing.
Well, I got a quick announcement. This thing is in the podcast.
Yeah, this podcast. The thing we're recording right now.
I wasn't sure if you were talking about the paper or the podcast or what.
Yeah,
your introduction. How about that?
I was gonna tell the listeners who these idiots are that are talking right now. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode. At this point, I don't think we need to introduce everybody, but just in case this is the first time listening to the podcast, what we do here is we get into the science of wildlife management and just understanding the wildlife that we like to hunt and fish for, and try to apply that knowledge to what we do in the field. So we hope that you guys can learn something from these podcasts, and that maybe it'll help you become a better hunter or fisherman, or just understand wildlife management a little bit better. So today we decided that we should probably shift our focus to fishing because turkey season's coming to a close, although I will give a quick update on my turkey season because it's not quite over yet. But people are starting to shift their minds towards what am I going to do for the next 4 to 6 months until hunting season rolls back around. And for a lot of people, that is fishing. And so today we're going to be focusing on striped bass, and specifically how hook and line fishing affects those bass in terms of stress levels and potential mortality. And this is really applicable to a variety of different fish. And we could talk a little bit about that as well. So hopefully you guys enjoy this one. Before we dive into the paper, we've got a couple little announcements. I think, Matt, you have one.
Yeah, so BHA Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Colorado chapter has an exciting event coming up. This is May 16th through the 18th. It's their, let me get the actual title, the Beers, Bands, and Barbed Wire Strands. So it's Colorado Public Lands Day celebration. So it's the whole weekend. There's going to be some great live music, some wild game food, and then on Saturday there's a big event to remove a bunch of barbed wire strands from some land around the Gunnisson area here in Colorado. I'm hoping to show up, and it looks like there's going to be all sorts of great vendors. And like I said, some different bands coming for each of the days. So it should be a fun time. Sweepstakes, silent auctions. Yeah. So
can our dozens of fans come and meet you, get signatures, get autographs?
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome. Wait, so are you on the BHA board now? Usually,
no. I just got since I signed up for Rendezvous, I got notifications about announcements and stuff. So I'm just saying,
this is part of the indoctrination, trying to sucker you into BHA.
I mean
honestly, BHA is super active in the Western states. think Florida's been, one of the more active eastern states, but over there in Colorado, I mean, those chapters are huge. So I would find it pretty exciting if you got involved with them somehow.
Yeah.
Um,
And I was just gonna say, like, conservation projects like this, like, it's not just a gathering of people getting together, but they're actually, there's action that they're going to be taking to improve the land, right? They're doing stuff for
yeah.
conservation efforts during this, and that's what I'm really excited about. And any organizations that get volunteers together to do stuff like that, I'm all in support of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you said, it's not just people getting together, but it's people that like. First of all, I just think it's hard to find people that are sort of on the same wavelength as us, like people that are not only hunters and fishermen, but also, aware and paying attention to conservation and trying to make a difference for the wildlife. So that's like the thing I've loved about being involved with BHA is just like it's a group of my peers, like really my peers, and I feel very at home when I'm at those events. So hopefully you can go. I think you'll really like the BHA cruise. I had a thought. It's gone. Do you have any other announcements? No?
That's it.
All right, my turn. So I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. This is the last podcast you're going to hear before this event. The Lake Kissimmee Mudboat Poker Run is on May 17th. And we're raffling off a super badass Uncle Jake custom boat that's worth, I don't know, $15,000. I don't know exactly how much it's worth, but it's worth a lot. And you can buy raffle tickets for that. And then the poker run itself, you can win, thousands of dollars. And it's just a really good time. A lot of really cool people come out. It's just a good time on the water. So if you have any kind of boat, it doesn't have to be a mud boat. It can be an airboat. It can be a regular outboard boat. I'll be there with my outboard. Come join us. I'll put a link in the description of where you can register. And if you're interested in those raffle tickets, you can buy those as well. That's announcement number one. Announcement number two, I promise this is like one of the last times you're going to hear me talk about this, but the bear hunt, we have this really important date coming up. May 21st is going to be the commission meeting in Ocala where the bear hunt proposal is going to be presented to FWC Commission, and they're going to be voting on whether or not they want to move forward with the proposal. So this is kind of a big one if you care about, public land hunting opportunities, and more importantly, science-based management. If you can get yourself to that meeting, the hunting community is depending on you to do that. I'll be there, and a lot of other people from the BHA chapter are going to be there. So come say hi, and more importantly, tell the commission how you feel about science-based management and that you want them to focus on the science to get this hunt instated. And that's all I'm going to say. I was going to say one other thing, but I just, don't want to bore you guys. Let's talk about fish.
All right. So like Mark said, this week we're talking about striped bass and the effects of different angling methods on post-release survival. So striped bass season is underway along the East Coast, and stripers are starting to make their river migrations to spawning grounds. So a lot of folks that they don't have access to get out in the ocean, or live more inland, are now going to have access to try to catch these fish. I've gone out a few times, and I've never landed a live one. I'll put it that way.
Wait, what the heck does that mean?
It's actually somewhat relevant to this paper. So we were out fishing for stripers, and the herring are running at the same time. So you catch herring, and then you put herring on one of the circle hooks and drop that down. And while we're fishing there, we see a striper just come floating by, and it was a good sized striper. So I was like, you know what, I gotta get my hands on one of these things. And I'm also just curious about the fish, so netted it up and gave it a good inspection. The gills were still red and everything.
Gave it a good photo shoot so you could pretend you caught it.
Exactly. Yeah. No, but no, I was just curious to see how it looked. It didn't show any signs of, any crazy hooking or something like that. The gills, like I said, they were still kind of red. You could tell it was dead, but other than the fact that it was just floating
It
there.
could be like a lactic acid issue, which we're going to talk about in this paper. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, that's cool. I've never even seen one of these things, outside
They
of
get
like
big.
aquariums and stuff.
Yeah.
I know they get
And
huge, and they remind me a lot of a snook. It's like
yeah.
down here we have snook. Seems like everywhere else, colder waters, they're focusing on those stripers. I definitely want to go up and try it one day. It looks like a really good
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I mean, you used a lot of the same gear.
Yeah,
Well,
no, a lot of people like it's essentially the same. That's like why I say it's like so similar. It's
yeah.
like the same fishery, just up north. Um, so who knows? Maybe one day. I wore my striper shirt. Not really. This is a total coincidence. But yeah. So let's talk about the methods, like what
Well,
they did
um,
here. Oh, you got more?
yeah, just a few more, just some more background about like the striper fishery, because so it's a really important fishery. Paper has an estimate that it's a $13 billion fishery on the East Coast, which is just, I
Wow.
mean, that's crazy amounts of money. And there's like 20 to 60 million individuals caught every year. So just tons of fish. Most of these fish, over 90%, typically get released. That's whether you have just anglers, like where I've done fishing, it's in the Hudson River. There's a lot of pollutants in the Hudson. Folks don't really want to eat anything out of there. So you might be releasing it for that reason. But also you have other spots where you have like slot limits. So you can only keep a certain size striper. So a lot of these fish get released. But there's some estimates from 2021 that 10% or almost 10% of the fish that got released ended up dying anyways. And so that was over 2.5 million fish that were released still died. So there have been a lot of studies that looked at the different factors that can affect post-release survival. So you have things like water temperature. If it's really warm, that could lead to higher survival or lower survival. The types of hooks and where the hooks attach in the fish, whether it's like in the throat or something, especially the gills, that can cause more lethal effects even if you release the fish. And so what this study wanted to look at, the overall objective was evaluating different gear, but really focusing on fly fishing gear and spin rod gear. And these are things that haven't really been evaluated, especially for stripers.
Well, and bait fishing gear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and to some degree, like I kind of like I understand where this question comes from, but I also feel like these kinds of studies are kind of like I don't even know how to like describe, but like almost like maybe snooty, like these bait, like oh, you're a bait fisherman. Like I'm going to tell you why, like fishing with lures is better. You know, like how like fly fishermen like Cody think they're better than everybody else. Like I feel like there's like tiers to that. So there's like the fly fisherman, and then there's the lure fisherman, and then bait fisherman. And I don't know. I just think that like everybody can enjoy the way their way of fishing. They do it for different reasons, but I do think one thing that's important from papers like this is you can learn from it that there might be a better way to go about doing what you do that could have less impact.
Yeah.
So
And also, just having an understanding of, like even if you fish within a specific method, just good fish handling in general can be so important. You might see the fish swim away, but that's not the end of the story. A lot of the times these fish, they'll go down and sulk and they'll swim away, but they don't always live. So just having an understanding of what you can do to help maximize the chances that this fish is actually going to survive in the long run.
So kind of like to that point, like I think there's a lot of people that like consider themselves to be like almost elite because they're catch and release fishermen. Like, oh, I've never killed a fish. I release everything, But the reality is that a lot of fish don't survive. And it's not just stripers. Like this occurs across the board. Like I've heard of, some studies like this that looked at bonefish. A lot of people have looked at sharks, because sharks don't have a good way of like getting rid of lactic acid in their muscles. So they often can die from like acidosis. It's like very common in hammerheads, and certain sharks that just kind of go balls to the walls and fight hard, like to the very end. They tend to have this issue, and so just a reminder to the listeners, like this isn't just striped bass. So if you're listening, you're like, well, I don't fish for striped bass. Why does this matter? This applies to a lot of different fish, and there's some principles to apply here that kind of go across the board. So
Yeah, I've heard for stock assessments when they don't have an accurate measurement of catch and release mortality, they'll a lot of times use 10% as their estimate, and like the intro's already showing it's about 10% for the stripers.
yeah. Well, and that also factors in like commercial bycatch as well, though, right?
I'm not 100% sure on that.
So I think usually when they're doing stock assessments, a lot of times they're basing that off of commercial catch.
A lot of it, from what I've read and seen at talks, is in Florida, like commercial species. So maybe it's more accurate for those, my understanding. But I wouldn't be surprised, if.
And this case is definitely recreational. This is they're only talking about the recreational fish that were caught and released.
Yeah. But to your point, like understanding this mortality rate is really important to understanding the population of these fish, and managing them better. So super cool topic of study. Do you have any other background stuff you want to add, or you want me to get into these methods?
Go for it.
Can I ask the European one? Because in Europe they really frown upon.
That's me.
Yeah, that's you.
The European one, like Mark.
Because don't they really frown upon catch and release and say it's like torture, but we kind of stand behind the, it's not 100% dead. You catch 9 of them statistically could be able to get caught again.
I think it really depends on like maybe the country. Like I haven't really heard that in Holland, but one thing they do in Holland is they close, like they have, like at least in freshwater, they have like predator season. And so like pike and zander, which is the larger, superior walleye, and some catfish species. There's like and perch, things like that. You're not allowed to fish for the predators during like the hotter summer months, because that's a time when they're more likely to suffer from like low oxygen levels in the blood. And pike often die if you fight them too hard. So you're not allowed to target them. But that said, I mean, pike is like a huge fishery in Europe, but not a lot of people like to eat pike. And I'm sure, somebody's going to hear me say that and be like, oh my God, pike are delicious. And, I know that's like a thing, especially in like the Midwest. A lot of people I think pickling pike is like a thing. And then it like dissolves the bones or something like that, because they have a lot of bones. It's like part of the reason that Europeans are like, ew, like I'd rather have a walleye, which of course walleye is delicious. But yeah, I don't think there's much of I don't think they really frown on catch and release, or at least that hasn't been my experience. I don't know.
You have,
but on that note, I'll go on a little tangent that relates to that. Like, I used to be like a hardcore catch and release fisherman. Like before I got into hunting, I was all about catch and release. I was like, this is the way. Very rarely I'd keep a snook, and then I started hunting and sort of made wild game and fish be like my, like the largest portion of my protein in my diet. I wasn't buying it anymore. And then suddenly it just seemed stupid to go fishing and then just let a fish go. And so while back in the day, I was like obsessed with tarpon and snook, snook out of season, like, cause that's when they're biting the best, is when the season's closed, like I was obsessed with doing that kind of stuff. And now I'm just like, it's not as exciting anymore because I want to put meat in the freezer. So I would say that I have gotten to a point where I sort of frown upon catch and release for my own purposes.
Now, just to follow up on that, I'm very similarly, I fish primarily to harvest food, but also, for the enjoyment of it. Now, if there's a fish, like here you have a bag limit of 3 trout, in a lot of the tributaries. And so I'll keep 2 and then I'll keep fishing. And then, when I'm ready to go, if I happen to get a third one, I'll keep the third one, or I'll just only get the 2. But that really involves, sometimes releasing a handful of fish.
Right.
That you'd be fine with, or would you just catch the 3 fish?
No, I'm totally fine with that. Of course, there's a lot of enjoyment in fishing.
Yeah.
Like I'm about to go up to Virginia to do a little bit of turkey hunting, and while I'm there, I'm like, oh man, I really want to catch a northern snakehead, because like I've never caught one of those. I'm not really going to have any means to cook the thing up. I just want to catch one, and I still do catch and release fish in. Like when we were all in Hawaii, I caught bonefish and let those go, even though you can eat them there. So yeah, no, I'm not saying like kill every fish that you catch, but I'm just saying like because of this like desire to fill the freezer, like catch and release fishing has less of an appeal to me now than it used to. Like I used to just go out, just cast for hours trying to catch fish, and like I was totally fine catching a nice fish, taking a picture and letting it go. And now, I'm definitely more inclined to want to keep it. Like me and Cody were just out on my boat the other day, and like we were catching snook, and like, I mean, I was catching snook, and and Cody was whipping his little fly rod around in hopes of doing the same. But, I caught a few snook, and they're all undersized. Like I was perfectly happy and like excited to catch them. It was enjoyable, but was I kind of hoping that I would catch a slot fish? Heck yeah. Like I haven't kept a snook in a really long time. So I would definitely, if I caught one, I would keep it. Whereas back in the day, I used to catch slot fish all the time. I would just let them all go. So,
yeah, we're definitely going for slots. But it's kind of interesting. One last thing before we take too much time. There's new like kind of work, East Coast versus West Coast fishing for snook is very different, like fishing culture wise, where East Coast anglers are more going for meat, going for slot, and once they get their slot, they're done. West Coast is more catch and release. They're out for fun, trying to bend the rod. And people are now starting to do these sort of stock assessment, or these impacts of anglers, and they're maybe coming to the conclusion that the catch and release is actually more impactful to our snook fishery on the West Coast, where they bend the rods, catch 100 in a day, but they all get released. So it's something.
So are you saying it's more impactful than actually keeping them?
Yeah,
that's on the population, because you're actually handling more fish.
Because when you catch one and you're like, all right, I'm done for the day, I'm going home.
If they fish in that manner,
you killed one fish. Whereas if you catch 10 snook and you didn't keep any of them, it's entirely possible that you killed 10 snook.
Yeah, you're statistically around 1, but you're catching 30 in a day.
Yeah,
you're going to kill.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't really considered that, but yeah, that makes total sense.
Sorry.
So of the 3 snook that I caught the other night, it's possible, 1 or 2 of them died.
I think they were all with the reflex metrics that we'll talk about in a second. This paper, I'd say they're all survivors. Maybe not that jack you dropped on the bow, but
oh no, that jack was fine. No, but the first snook that I caught, that fish I had to revive it for a while before it swam off because the water was super warm.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're getting off on.
Well, hang on, Cody. How many snook did you catch?
Yeah, how many did you catch, Cody?
I caught a really skinny one that had bars on it and big teeth. It was barracuda. I caught 0.
I mean, mostly because he was using a fly rod.
No.
It was like as soon as we pulled it, as soon as I like got the first bite and he saw a snook, he just got all excited. He was like, "Oh, I'm getting the fly rod." I was like, "Well, there goes all your chances of catching a fish." And then for the rest of the night, I just had to listen to. All right. Anyway, let's talk about the methods.
Methods, yeah.
All right.
all very related to what we're talking about. So basically, what they did for this study is they went fishing, like literally hook and line fishing, and they used three different methods. So there was bait fishing, and then artificial lure fishing, and fly fishing.
No,
Um,
no bait though, right?
what?
Just lures and fly, right?
No, they use bait.
Are you sure? I think they
So
just compared the.
they had spinning or fly fishing gear with artificial lures or flies, and they had different types of hooks, barbed or
Maybe
barbless.
that's
Most lures were soft plastic swim baits.
Oh, apparently I did a really crappy job of reading this paper.
you're good.
I thought they used
ChatGPT
bait
for you.
because later on they're talking about uh, the implications for bait fishing, which is kind of interesting. They're talking about the implications of bait fishing when they didn't actually do bait fishing.
Yeah, they definitely go into some of that, and I think they struggled a bit with sample size for some of their different components. What they
It's
could
probably because they
actually.
didn't use bait. Would have
Yeah.
caught a lot more fish. Um, but yeah, so basically they caught these fish, and then they once they got the fish in, they recorded a whole bunch of data. So they were looking at like where the hook was located. For instance, like was it in the mouth? Was it like in their throat? Was it in the gills? They looked, is the fish bleeding? They looked at how long the fish was being fought for, and how long it was out of the water before they were able to return it. And then they took some blood samples. And so with the blood samples, there's a number of variables they can look at that are indicators of stress. And so one of those is glucose. And so my understanding of glucose is that basically when there's more glucose in the blood, they are sort of tapping into those energy stores in their body, their energy reserves, to help them exert energy in their fight or flight response. So higher glucose indicates more stress. Lactate is another one. This is basically when we work out and our muscles start to feel sore, it's because of lactic acid buildup or lactate in the muscles. And so, not to get too into the weeds here, but we have really well aerated muscles. That's why our muscles are red if you look at them. But a lot of fish, when you look at like white flaky meat, the meat that we all want in fish, those are anaerobic or fast twitch muscles. And so when they are used a lot, you get this buildup of lactate. And then it takes a really long time for them to be able to remove that lactic acid. So again, if there's a lot of lactate in the blood, it indicates again that they like exerted a lot of energy. That's more stressful for them. And then finally, they looked at cortisol levels, which is just a steroid in the blood, also related to stress levels. The higher the cortisol, the more stressed out the fish is. And then they assessed injury based on the hooking or just the visible trauma that they might have seen if there was like lesions or anything on the fish. And then they took all of that data and did some fancy stuff that Cody's going to tell you about.
Should I just skip over fancy stuff and go into the results though?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the figures really show a whole lot of interesting patterns. So I think we can just talk about, what.
Yeah, I think main kind of. Yeah. Okay. So they ended up having these observers on these boats, kind of like a citizen scientist sort of methodology, where the observer, the scientist,
What's citizen science?
where you're using the citizens to help collect data. It's non-scientific people.
Why does that matter?
It's involving stakeholders in the science-backed decision-making process. Hopefully,
True. But I think more importantly, you're in this case, you're catching fish the way that your average fisherman would. You're not like
true,
you're
true,
not imposing your scientific bias to the method.
true. That's a really good point. But they did I liked how they standardized it as much as they could, while still having these citizens catch their fish. And they did survey the anglers and asked them how experienced or not they felt that they were as striper anglers, from advanced to intermediate to novice. Um, the observer would then handle all the fish once they came in, do these sort of tests on it that Mark mentioned, take the hook out. That all this was recorded and measured, quantified. They ended up catching 95 striped bass. A subset of those, I think it was 30 or 35, were actually included in another study they were running where they acoustically tagged them. So they'll use those full 95 fish for certain components of this study, and then the subset of like 50 for others where they weren't actually influenced by the tagging procedure. Um, Most of the fish were caught on spinning gear, about 57 of them. 38 were caught on fly. Fight times did not significantly vary between the two methodologies, spinning and fly. Um, Fight time, as you might guess, increased with fish size. They did have one mortality on arrival, and that was from, as you'd expect, a novice angler hooked in the gills on spinning gear, I believe. Wasn't the fly guys.
Caught more fish, it might have happened.
Um, that's a good point. So handling time averaged about 237 seconds. We don't probably need to get into that. Um, 82 of the fish had non-critical injuries. 11 had critical, where they were hooked in the gill and gullet. These were the fish that were most likely to have low reflex scores. So they, what were some of the measurements that they did? They flipped the dorsal fin down and saw if it popped back up. They flexed the tail, the caudal tail, and saw if there was any flex
As opposed to
there.
the pectoral tail?
Yes. The call. I'm trying to think. There was a gag reflex one. They stuck a rod in the back of, like, on the tongue, see if the esophagus would close up. So they had 5 different metrics for, like, as like a health reflex post capture, the workup, and then release. So the ones that were gut hooked, gill hooked, scored lower on that reflex score.
What does that ultimately mean, though? Like, in terms of their survival,
Well, they were,
of survival?
yes, presumably those fish were more likely to not make it, um, based on other studies where they
So I
saw
just
low.
we kind of skipped this in the methods section, but there's, like you said, there's those assessments of like reflexes that they did that I thought were kind of cool. So like you said, like head reflex, see if the gills are moving, if they're breathing normal. Mouth
Right.
reflex, they'll pull the lower jaw down and see if the fish closes it on its own. Um, Dorsal fin reflex, so if the fish was able to kind of like raise it or lower it, the dorsal fin, and then the gag reflex one, yeah, I thought that one was pretty cool. Where
I've
they
never heard of that.
something into the esophagus to see, or to see if the esophagus contracted after the tongue was pushed down, and then the body reflex, like you said, seeing if you could have that kind of gentle flex to it. But these are things like, I think, coming back to what we're talking about with anglers, if you have a fish, do you just let it go and then assume it's going to be fine, or do you want to like test some of these reflexes to see if the fish is actually, has a chance of kicking off fine, or do you want to, let it revive a little bit longer, stick with it, try to keep it upright, flush the water over the gills.
Well, that's a great point, because like these are things that anybody can do.
Exactly.
To, like, they're like, oh, this fish is a keeper and it's probably not going to survive. Like, maybe I should just keep it. And like, these are some things they can test to like see if that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But then it would be really nice to know depending on the score that they got on these tests, like what was the likelihood of survival,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't really give you that answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they talked about it a little bit with those tag. I keep wanting to say snook tag striper that were a part of the study. Those like 35, but that's a different paper. Didn't really get into it too much. With your point for revive, like, yeah, I totally agree. Some species, though, I feel maybe it's a superstitious thing, but they release better if you like torpedo them in, or other regions like
Yeah.
in the Everglades around the Cape. Like, you don't want to stick your hand in the water for too long reviving these fish. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, one thing I think that a lot of people don't think about doing is like if you have a live well,
yeah,
you could put the fish in there and circulate like high oxygen water, and the chances that they're going to revive are actually way better in that controlled environment than just putting them out in the water. It's like, I mean, the number of times that I've caught a fish that was like, it might survive, and then like a dolphin nailed it like right next to the boat. It's like, well, it's definitely not surviving now. Whereas if like you were able to put it in the water and it was like, kick in and was able to immediately take off, like that wouldn't have happened. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Same thing. Like, so when I was doing some work with lake trout, we'd have the fish, like after the surgery, we'd hold them in a live well, kept it, well oxygenated with a few bubblers going, and tossed ice in there, because keeping that water cool can really be helpful too. Especially, if you have a fish that you're catching from deep water and you're pulling them up through like that warm surface water, putting them right into warm water after catching them, they're already stressed, and now you're putting them to a harmful environment. Get them to cool down in cold water
there's
can be real
just
helpful.
so much less oxygen there.
Yeah.
Like that's always been like the reason that I want to try and torpedo them down.
Mm-hmm.
But one way to deal with that again is like to get them in like a recirculating tub that has a ton of oxygen.
Yeah.
So,
A little bit of a tangent again, but there's also those like the fish release mechanisms where you can, it attaches to the lip of the fish, and it's got like a weight to it, and you can put it on your line, and you drop the fish down, you pull up, and it releases the fish at depth, so it gets it down to that colder habitat. And that stuff can be so great. There were some biologists here in Colorado that were doing that with massive lake trout in one of the reservoirs here. These lake trout are coming up from deep water, have a bunch of air in their stomachs when they get up, and to have that fish get back down is almost impossible, while it's got all the air in it. So you can try burping it, but when you do that, you're putting more stress on the fish. So if you just
you're stabbing a hole and it's like swim bladder or whatever to like,
or even if you're just like squeezing it, because they're one of the species, not all species, but some species you can squeeze them and the air will come out, but you're squeezing the crap out of this fish, you're getting the slime off of it. Just get the fish back down with this weight, and we were able to watch it on the fish finder. You can see it going down, and then they saw where you released it, and you can kind of see the fish swim away, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a good point you brought up though about like getting it to the deeper water where there's more oxygen, because I think a lot of times we just talk about those like those devices like just dealing with that barotrauma, and like getting that air recompressed so that they can control their buoyancy again. But yeah, the higher oxygen levels of deeper water is definitely a good point that I think a lot of people kind of miss.
I think some states I think some states are trying to make those mandatory to have on your boat. Those sequelizers.
Mm-hmm. I think Florida is one of them. Like they're trying to make it mandatory, but people are resistant to change.
I've seen some pretty clever like methods that folks have used too. With like some smaller fish, you get a milk crate and you can put a line on it and put some weight in it. Put the fish in the milk crate upside down, so the fish gets pushed down. Once it hits bottom, you just pull the milk crate back up, so fish will swim off.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things you can do, but I think in order to have it be like regulated in any kind of way, it has to be like a certified device,
Yeah.
But anyway, we're getting on this tangent here. Cody, tell us what they concluded from these results.
All
Like
right.
what?
I guess I didn't really talk about blood physiology, and then I'll recap.
Oh yeah.
As you'd expect, like Mark introduced, the fish that had longer fight times had higher amounts of that blood lactate, um, greater amounts of sodium and chloride levels. So they mentioned in the paper they're respirating more, so they're gonna just get more of that salt into their bloodstream because they're breathing salt water. Um, that was my understanding, at least.
And it's
um,
also just an indicator of like the
anaerobic.
physiological stress. So just fish were stressed because they were fighting longer. Makes sense.
So what you'd expect. So yeah, I guess overall, fight time is going to be positively correlated with physiological stress. The J hooks were slightly more detrimental, more likely to have poor reflex impairment, but they did struggle a little bit with statistical power. They didn't have a large enough sample size to really get at the circle hooks versus the J hooks on conventional versus fly, but they did show there wasn't a difference between the conventional and fly with J hooks. Um, and I think that's about. Am I missing anything? They
No,
Um,
didn't.
I think that's
yeah.
that kind of covers the gist of it.
I was kind
I've
of
done.
bummed they didn't talk too much about the barbed versus not barbed. I think again it was sample size issues.
Yeah, I mean, just my opinion on that though. Like barbed versus not barbed has a lot more to do with handling
Yeah.
than like the damage that it's going to do to a fish. Like that little barb is pretty minimal. Um, Now, especially with like if you're using like treble hooks or anything like that, having them barbed, it just, I mean, if you've ever tried to take, a lure with two treble hooks out of a fish's mouth while it's shaking, like not only is it a pain in the ass, but it's potentially detrimental to your health. um, but in terms of a single hook type lure, like I don't think it really should matter if you have barbs or not. I would like to see treble hooks be like required to have no barbs though, because there's so many hooks there; they hold in pretty well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's interesting that they were looking at like circle hook versus J hook in like flies because you're still dealing with a you're watching and feeling a fish bite. So like you're gonna get the hook in the mouth, you know. I think where that J hook versus circle hook thing really comes into play is with bait fishing.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't do that. And I feel like they really should have. I would have really liked to see, not that there isn't studies that do this, but like the potential stress caused by these different types of hooks and the injuries that are caused. Obviously these things exist. Otherwise, there wouldn't be like mandates to use circle hooks for certain types of fish. But I don't know about you guys, but I, for one, like I'm a huge fan of circle hooks. Like most of the time, if I'm bait fishing, I'm using circle hooks because I absolutely hate when a fish gets hooked in the stomach, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you just have to cut the line and hope for the best.
Hmm.
And I mean, I don't know, but I would guess that most of the time those fish don't survive.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised because I've actually seen like with lake trout, I've caught a number of fish that you can see the hook in the stomach, and sometimes it's all that's left is the lure because the hooks will rust pretty quickly and they
Yeah.
pass them fairly
Mm-hmm.
well. Um, there was
I guess
another
it depends
paper.
where, like, it depends, like, where they're hooked. Like,
Yeah.
if it makes it all the way into the stomach, there's a lot of acid there
Hmm.
that'll rust that hook pretty quickly.
Hmm.
Whereas if it's, like, stuck in the throat and it hasn't made it to where that acid is yet, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what effects that has. All I know is that it hurts my soul a little
Yeah.
bit every
No,
time
and
it
I
happens.
totally get that. And I think what you said there though is really important. You got to cut the line on that stuff because as soon as you try messing with that hook to get that out, that fish isn't going to make it.
Yeah,
There
you're
was
making
another
it worse.
paper that I was looking at that was talking about like the through the gill method where you can like
Mm-hmm.
get deeper into the fish's throat by going through the gills, and
Just rip the
those gills are
apart.
super sensitive. That's not, maybe, like 1 out of 10 times you might get lucky and be able to pop it out quick without touching the gills, but 9 out of 10 times, like just cut the hook, just let the hook go, release the fish, get it back. Because even without that stomach acid, as long as it's in water, these hooks will,
In saltwater especially,
yeah, especially, that's a good point. They'll rust real quick. I've found a number of lures in water where, it's that the lure looks perfectly fine and the hooks on it are all shot, because even in freshwater, because it's been there for, maybe just a few days even.
Well, and to that point, a lot of these manufacturers, they use these high carbon steel hooks, which are really strong, but they rust super fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like by design, they're going to rust away really quickly.
Trying to stay away from the stainless, and then circle hooks inline. Studies have shown has the best hookup ratio, least risk with the inline circles rather than offset.
Yeah. I mean, I love circle hooks. If you know how to use them, like they're super effective. And in a lot of cases, like you get better hook, like you get more landed fish than you do with a J hook. Like, especially when I'm thinking about snook, because they have those like sandpaper lips, I want that hook to be, in the lip. I want it to be either the corner of the mouth or somewhere in that lip, because they're not going to sand their way through a hook. Mm-hmm. But if that hook is inside of their mouth and they're hitting that leader, anybody who's fished for snook knows that like they'll fray through a leader so damn fast with those lips.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same thing with like pike, so many sharp teeth.
Not even comparable, bro.
It's the same concept.
You're going to have to come and catch a snook.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
I'll have to
catch
a pike
literally their mouth is like, their lips are like sandpaper. And when you hold them like a bass, mm-hmm. they shake. It like the next morning you look at your hand, you're like, what the hell? Like all the skin's gone.
And their operculums, Jesus, are like razor sharp too. If you miss those,
your line gets wrapped on one of those. Like sometimes you'll go to set the hook on a snook, and you're just like, all right, here we go, and you go to set the hook, and then it just snaps off like there was never anything there to begin on, and you're like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
And hits that gill plate, and it's like a razor blade.
I don't know. Anyway. This makes me really want to catch a striper.
Right. You should probably not bring your fly rod.
I'd rather catch one on fly and then I can just retire and be like, I did it.
Yeah. Once you catch your one, me and Matt will have caught like 30 on spinning gear. Actually, next time I'm going to bring my fly rod, just to see if it's actually the fly gear or the fisherman.
I feel like with those lights though, where you're fishing dock lights, like those fish know what's up. And if you present something a little different, a little more subtle, sometimes that can be really good. And it was not the case when I was up there. But
when I was in Miami, I used to do this a lot, and like I caught a lot of fish on fly. But I will also say that one of the things you're disadvantaged with the fly is like when you're fly fishing, you got to focus on fly fishing. You can't, like, if you have a person that's spin fishing and a person that's fly fishing, the fly fisher is just screwed every time, because I'm going to get my lure in there way sooner than you. That's why at the end I was like, all right, I'll just let you fish, because otherwise I was going to spook all the fish before you even got there. And then I let him cast at one of these lights that just literally had snook just blowing up left and right the whole time. He casts in there like 10 times, doesn't catch shit. And then we float past it, and I pitch my lure back behind me and just let it kind of troll and hook a snook.
I think they went down. Yeah, that was and you had some weight with your plastic lure. But you like
whatever excuses you want to make, bro.
You love bow hunting. And I feel like fly fishing is the bow hunting of the angling world.
Yeah, maybe to some degree. But I actually kill things with my bow, so...
Yeah, I don't kill anything with anything, except pigs occasionally.
Yeah,
you're not wrong though. Bow hunting is kind of the fly fishing of the hunting world, but yeah, I don't know, man. It doesn't matter. I'm just happy that you like to get out there. You like to enjoy our outdoors. I just like giving you a hard time, though.
No, that was a fun night. I don't care if I catch stuff as much anymore. And if I catch
Good.
one fly, I'm way more excited. Like it makes my whole trip. So I'm a
Well,
little.
I'm glad you don't mind not catching anything.
I know the risk. I know the risk.
All right, so let's wrap this thing up. So, I mean, I feel like for me, this question is kind of easy to answer because I already knew about a lot of this stuff going into this. But like, how does this like potentially change the way that you might do things when you're fishing?
So I guess for me, ultimately the paper, was comparing fly and spin rods, and they didn't find anything, and some gear has an effect, and it all makes sense if you foul hook a fish, or if you get it like in a critical spot, the gills, the throat, you got to be more cautious with how you release it and how you handle it. I think for me, those techniques for assessing, like the amount of stress and like the reflexes of the fish, those could be really helpful for understanding if this fish is in good condition to swim off, or if it's something where maybe I want to help it revive a little bit longer, or if I haven't filled my bag limit, maybe that's one of the fish that I'll hold on to.
You're just gonna be out
Yeah.
there gagging stripers, gagging lake trout.
Remember, you're supposed to use your finger. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna try
Um,
the next snook I catch. I didn't know that was a thing.
oh my god. I would have really liked, like, I agree. I think those reflex things are really cool. I would have really liked to see um, them give some sort of, and like you said, there might be a paper about like using the acoustic tags that they did this to see like what the survival was on fish that, had these like injuries, the ones that were gut hooked, and how that compared to those reflexes, so that we actually have like a tangible method that people can use to go, okay, well, this reflex isn't really responding. This isn't responding. Like this fish is probably going to die, and then maybe we would waste less fish by feeding them to dolphins and sharks, and just eat them ourselves if we feel like they're not going to survive, So Luke, I'm gonna send this to Luke so he can listen. I want to
The author of the
see,
paper.
yeah, I want to see like, so when I had done some of this stuff with sharks back in the day, we were actually looking at land-based shark fishing, very similar kind of study. But what we did, and I'm so frustrated that my technician never published this because he was supposed to use the data for a master's and he never did. But we put accelerometer tags on the sharks, and they were like I forget what it's called. We use like the zinc ties that like rust away and then release, and then it floats to the surface, and then you can go and collect the tag. And these accelerometer tags would basically tell you if the shark died and how quickly it died because it would stop moving. And so I would love to see something like that. And you could probably do that with acoustics as well. Just if it starts pinging in one spot over and over again and doesn't move, it's probably dead. So I would definitely like to see that step in this study.
Yeah,
I think it
the
could be
tough
really useful.
part with that, like with these fish that are acoustically tagged, it's another wound, right? It's a surgical implantation of these fish that you're adding another element or another variable that could influence the fish health. So you could have, the fish appears healthy, and then you give it the surgery, release it,
Cut
and
it
then it
open.
dies, or so it's tough to get that post release assessment without having another
Well,
impairment to the fish.
keep in mind there's other ways to attach those acoustic tags
Oh yeah,
than cutting them open. Like you could attach them externally with like a like a like a
zip tie.
spaghetti style tag
Yeah,
and have the tag like literally attached to the outside. Is it going to stay on as long? Absolutely not. But for this particular type of thing, like you could use a bunch of like I don't even know what the smallest ones are that they make, but if you can get a tag that's going to transmit for, a week, even a few days, that's enough,
Yeah.
to understand if there's mortality there.
Yeah. I'm even thinking, you could like glue a tag on the outside of the fish.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that probably
Wait a
wouldn't
few
work
days,
because
like you said.
they're constantly shedding scales and mucus and stuff, so it probably wouldn't work that well. But I think you could use a spaghetti style tag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we did with sawfish back in the day before Greg Palakis was allowed to surgically implant them.
Hmm.
We would just literally use a hole puncher and punch a hole in the dorsal fin, and then I think we might have zip tied them on. I'm not really sure what we
You
did, but
worked
it
with
was
sawfish?
yeah, like my very first internship that I ever did. I was
That's
working
cool.
with this guy Greg Palakis that shows up. He comes to like all the Fact Network meetings and stuff. I was his intern way back in the day. It was pretty dope.
Yeah.
All right, Cody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Cody, give us your takeaway message.
I don't really have much to say. Shout out to Luke Griffin. I'm guessing this was like maybe during his postdoc then, because I think he's at USF now, University of South Florida. He's faculty, so I'm guessing this is while he was a postdoc. They had old data, and he made something of it. And no one's looked at the fly versus the spin anglers, so he backed fly anglers were not more impactful than spin fishermen. That's the takeaway, I think.
I don't think that's the takeaway here.
But yeah, I don't really have anything else other than what you guys have hit on
I think
add that I can think of.
there's a good chance that this data was from like the same kind of thing that I had with like a technician that had this cool idea
Mhm.
and then just didn't publish it. So, which kind of sucks because that means that Luke didn't even get to do all the fishing. Because if I was like trying to come up with a cool project that could give me an excuse to just go do what I love, this is the project I would come up with.
Right? I mean, he did his dissertation on tarpon in the Keys and like around Florida, so don't feel too bad for him.
Yeah, yeah, it
Did
hasn't been too rough.
some sweet. He's done some sweet research.
Yeah.
They also did use, the public anglers, so
Yeah.
no one on the project would have been able to.
Okay, but let's be real. They were fishing
Oh
themselves.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Like there was just like it was basically them going like, yeah, we're gonna use public anglers. I'm gonna call my two best buddies that I fish with every weekend anyway, and we're gonna fish together.
Yeah.
Great
Kind of
project.
reminds me of one of the bios here in Colorado who was doing a survey at one of the alpine lakes, and they had to hike like some crazy distance to get in, and I forget what species they were going after in the lake, but I think it was some sort of cutthroat, and they brought all sorts of different sampling gear, and of course they brought their fishing gear too, and their angling gear, and they didn't have to break out any of the electrofishing, any of the nets. They've got plenty of fish just with their rods. So
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, fishing for those fish over in Colorado up in the mountains is like it's like they'd never even seen a person before. They would eat anything that hit the water.
yeah,
So, all right, let's wrap this thing up. Hopefully, y'all found this one helpful. Hopefully, it influences the way that you go about handling your fish and what tackle you use. In our next episode, we are going to be talking a little bit more about fishing, but we're going to go to a completely different part of the state or different part of the country. We're going to focus on Florida because right now there's a big debate going on about red snappers and the season lengths for the West Coast and the East Coast. We don't know what paper we're going to do just yet, but we're going to dive into this one and see if we can give you guys some answers about why the seasons are set up the way that they are. So catch you guys in the next one. Make sure you're subscribed. And, I didn't even talk about my turkey hunt. If you want to hear about the turkey hunt, go check it out on my YouTube channel, Mark Goes Outside. The whole hunt is up there. It's freaking epic. Check it out. Peace out, guys.
thanks for listening.
See ya.